All right, everyone. Welcome to Fiveable and welcome to our weekly current events and COVID-19 and election 2020 update. I'm Akalesh.
And I'm Fatma.
And yeah, let's get started. So on our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about our social media. Follow us on all of these different platforms: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. So Brandon, who does the other week of current events, he runs the Fiveable TikTok. So go follow him on TikTok. Specifically with our stream schedule, we have math and English on Mondays, social science on Tuesdays, science on Wednesdays, and history on Thursdays. Since cram sessions have started, those cram sessions might not follow the schedule. So as always, make sure you check the Fiveable website just consistently so that you're up to date on all the information that you need. Specifically for AP Gov and AP Lang, we have our stream schedules on this next slide. Every Monday at 8:30, at least for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be doing a weekly current events and COVID-19 update, just like this one, and that's hosted by Fatima, Brandon, and myself. In terms of the free review sessions for AP Gov, those are 9 p.m. Eastern, and tomorrow I'm going to be hosting one on civil rights and civil liberties. And then the next cram session, if you have a cram pass for AP Gov, is going to be April 29th at 8 p.m. With Supreme Court cases. In terms of AP Lang, they always stream Mondays at 7 p.m., so that's before us. So next Monday is going to be rhetorical analysis, question and answer in practice. And then the next cram session for AP Lang is going to be April 30th at 9 p.m., which is practice with argument. As always, again, like I said before, keep checking the website just because some streams might be removed, some might be added, even at the last minute. So if you keep checking the website, you can find all the study guides, the new tools that have been released, and keep up to date with streams. So specifically in today's stream, we're going to start out with a COVID-19 update, which is kind of going to take most of the current events part. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Kim Jong-un before we move into the 2020 election update with Fatima. All right, so in terms of statistics, our worldwide totals, the number of cases of COVID have surpassed 3 million, and we have over 208,000 deaths worldwide. In the United States, we've surpassed 1 million cases and over 56,000 deaths. So I believe we crossed the 1 million mark today. Again, these statistics are sometimes a little bit more of an estimate or an extrapolation from day to day. So like it might not be the most accurate, but we have somewhere around 1 million cases. So it could be plus or minus a few thousand. In terms of the top 5 states with coronavirus cases, I'm sure you guys have all been hearing of New York. They are still on top at number 1. New Jersey and Massachusetts, which again are border states in New York, they round out the top 3. And then Illinois, which I found was surprising, but again, they also have a major hub in their state, so that, I mean, I guess it makes sense. And then California is the 5th on that list. So that's all with the United States. Now we're going to talk a little bit about something our president said last week that seems to have generated some concern. He, during a press conference, like a coronavirus task force press conference that you'll see is hosted almost every day, he asked his medical team to look into the possibility of using disinfectants to cure the virus in the body. So he was like, we're thinking about, or I think this would work. And he was talking about literally injecting a disinfectant into the body. Supposedly he was being sarcastic, and that's what he's come out and said. But again, that's just what he said. There has been a spike in people using disinfectants improperly. Dettol and Lysol have both put out statements saying don't ingest disinfectants or the soaps or whatever else you might be using to actually clean surfaces. Governor Hogan of Maryland said that there's been a huge spike in calls to their like coronavirus task center in terms of like, can I do this? Can I don't know, use a disinfectant to get rid of coronavirus? Again, that's not recommended, so don't do that. It's just something that he said, and he's kind of, I guess, now gone back on that and said he was being sarcastic. So one thing that you'll see, and again, tying this back into AP Gov, is that the president has control, or generally has control of the media. So the president can get access to the media whenever he wants. It's called like the bully pulpit in a way, or in reference to how he can get his policies out there and make sure that he gets support, especially during the election cycle, when now Vice President Biden, who is a presumptive nominee, he probably can't get as much media coverage because he's not the current president. So the current president always has that easy accessibility to get media. However, other political candidates and other politicians really just don't have that. So that's just something to think about in terms of AP Gov. And that's covered in your Unit 2 with the bureaucracy and how all of these different branches of government interact with the media. So if you want to go back and look at iron triangles and issue networks, that's a great concept to connect to this kind of ordeal that we're facing. So on this next slide, we're going to talk about the White House's plan to reopen and ramp up testing. So they've put out 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is going to be the launch phase, and that's going to be diagnostic testing, making sure there's enough research labs and they're all equipped to handle coronavirus tests. They want to ramp up testing capacity. This has kind of been the main goal from the very beginning. Phase 2 is going to be scale, so expanding testing infrastructure, again with those labs, making sure that states that are the most affected have the capacity to deal with those tests that are going to be coming in. And then phase 3 is going to be coordinating with the governors about testing plans. So again, kind of connecting this back to AP Gov, this whole situation is providing us a really good way to, again, connect those concepts. So this is a great example of federalism. And federalism, as I'm sure you guys know, is a relationship between the federal government and the state government. And there's always controversy and conflict over who should have the most power, right? So that's how it was even from the beginning of like when the Constitution was drafted, etc. The Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, who should have the power, the federal government or the state government? One thing that you'll see is that state governors want the power, right? Because they're in control of their state and they know what's best for their state. The federal government wants power because they want to be able to do stuff that's uniform. So you'll see there's different ways that the federal government can give states money. They can scale back funding if they feel the state isn't doing the right thing. So again, this is a really good example of federalism, and I encourage you to think about ways you can connect those AP Gov concepts back into these current events. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit, well, it's just an image of a map. And this is a map that describes who's under a stay-at-home order and who's not. So if you look at the dark orange, those states are all currently shut down or restricted. They have stay-at-home orders in place. So this is as of today. Again, this might not take into consideration if the governor has extended it yet or not. So like I know my governor in North Carolina, he just extended the stay-at-home order to May 8th, so an extra week. However, South Carolina, they have started to reopen. So they started to open salons and like some non-essential businesses. If you look at the light orange, those orders are all expiring on April 30th. If you look at the green, those are the partial reopening. So in terms of schools, I think Montana is the only state that I've heard of so far that has said that they would allow schools to reopen. So I think they've kind of recommended that the school districts and the local authorities have more of a say in it, so they've kind of pushed it down, whereas most states, I think over 30 states at this point, have now said that it's mandated that all public schools K through 12 close through the rest of the academic year. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about the stimulus bill, the stimulus package that was passed. So a few weeks ago, the $2 trillion CARES Act, which is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, was passed. And basically, throughout the time that this is going on, the Treasury will send out 150 million stimulus payments to Americans. In the first 3 weeks after this act has been passed, $158 billion of money has been issued, and people that are going to receive automatic payments or have received automatic payments are those on Social Security, those with supplemental security income, which is called SSI, I guess is a short form. And then veterans or Veterans Affairs beneficiaries who haven't filed a tax return in the past 2 years. So those are the three groups that are going to be receiving automatic payments, and I believe those groups are the ones that are priorities. On this next slide, again, we're going to talk some more about the CARES Act and what it entails and what will happen in the next few weeks. Starting last week, the Internal Revenue Service mailed the first paper checks. So again, throughout the past 3 weeks, we've been seeing direct deposit happening to almost 90 million Americans. The IRS is expected to send out about 5 million paper checks per week. However, it could take up to 5 months for everyone eligible for a check to get one in the mail. So if they don't have direct deposit, it could be a little bit more of a waiting time. Additionally, what I saw today is that they're going to be sending out money by lowest income first, so kind of in a progressive manner. And then you don't have to pay taxes on the stimulus payment that you receive. So what you receive is like yours, so you don't have to pay taxes. Okay, so there's a question. What happened with the whole signature checks thing? Yes, so Donald Trump, or President Trump, decided to put his name on there and sign the stimulus checks. Again, this was kind of seen as a way to market his campaign for the presidency in 2020, because if Americans are receiving these checks and they have President Trump's name on them, then it's kind of an indication, or they might assume that Trump is the one that's directly responsible for giving them that money, right? So it's kind of like a campaign trick, I guess, or a campaign method. I believe Chuck Schumer has called for those, or his name, to be removed from those checks, and I think something is happening in Congress like right now, within the past 24 hours, I believe, is when Chuck Schumer called for that. So again, that's a developing story. So I would just keep an eye out for that. Yeah, that's all we're going to talk about, is a map of social distancing. So this kind of goes with the map from 2 slides ago. So the green, which I believe that state, the only state that's green on here, is Nevada, I think. And that means they have a B for social distancing. So good job if you live in Nevada. Basically, every other state is doing pretty bad, especially down south. You can see South Carolina and another southern state that I do not know, which I should, have an F rating. Now, both of those states, I believe, have called for reopening. So again, this is kind of where you'll see that right now the Republican governors are the ones that are calling for reopening, just because their supporters are the ones that are fighting for that reopening. So again, a lot of this stuff that governors are doing, the president is doing, local officials are doing, is based on politics. So even though a lot of them really do care about us and want to make sure that it's best for us, a lot of this stuff is just politics. So they want to make sure they can win their next election. In terms of the president, in times of crisis, the approval rating, his approval rating skyrockets. So no matter what president, what political party, what time, that's just something that happens. So in terms of George W. Bush during 9/11, his approval rating, I believe, was at over 90%. So again, that shows how during a time of crisis, approval ratings increase. Now, the president is going to try to appeal to the voters, especially this being an election year, and try to make sure that the majority of people are listened to and the people are getting what they want. Because how he deals with this crisis could possibly either win him the election or lose him the election. So again, that's just something you'll see, is that sometimes you might be like, well, that's not the right decision. Like, I know that's not the right decision. It's probably because it's politically motivated. That's just something to consider when you think about really any news story, when it's presented by the media, when you see a law being passed. All of these things have political motivations and biases behind them. So on this next slide, kind of moving away from coronavirus, we're going to talk about Kim Jong-un. So again, before all of coronavirus happened, this was a current event stream, but now it's kind of been moved to a coronavirus and election 2020 stream. But this is a major current event that's been taking the world by storm. So, is Kim Jong-un alive? Today, North Korean state media published a letter signed and dated by Kim Jong-un, and dated for today, so like April 27th. and it was to the South African president and congratulating them on like their Freedom Day or some important holiday that was happening there. Now, nothing unfiltered ever comes out of North Korea. So anything, especially if North Korean state media is publishing it, has gone through lots of vetting and is exactly what, like, if they want to put an image out, that's what's going to go out through their state media. There's really no way of verifying if that letter was really written by Kim Jong-un, signed by Kim Jong-un, dated by Kim Jong-un. We don't know. Yesterday, I believe, a South Korean presidential advisor did tell CNN that the Kim Jong-un was alive and well. However, earlier this week and probably into last week, there were reports that Kim Jong-un was near death. Some people said he was dead after heart surgery. They said he was. Some said he was brain dead and was in a vegetative state. So again, this is a developing story. We don't really know what's happening just because there's been no word that's come out of North Korea. I do know that the last time a major leader died, which I believe was his father, I'm not perfectly like certain on that, but it took them 48 hours after his death to announce that he was indeed dead. So again, just something to remember is that in countries like North Korea, there's nothing unfiltered that comes out. For example, that country has not announced any coronavirus cases. So according to their totals, there are 0 coronavirus cases in North Korea. Now, everyone else obviously thinks that's not true. They just want to hide it and keep that image up of North Korea being strong and being able to fight something like a disease. So just like I've said before, it's always important to make sure that you're analyzing all of these news reports and things like that, especially when they come out on our Twitter feed, Insta feed. You need to make sure that they're true before you spread them, because that's how misinformation and stuff like that spread. So that's just something to consider. So now, moving away from all this sad stuff, we're going to move into some happy news. So as always, over the past few weeks, we've been trying to give you guys some happy news, because we know the news cycle right now is depressing, and 2020 has been pretty depressing so far. So these are all from the Good News Network, so I just kind of screenshotted the headlines. The first one, instead of selling lemonade, a boy set up a drive-by joke stand to spread laughter during quarantine. So people could drive by his little lemonade stand and he would tell them a joke. So that was a creative idea. So if anyone wants to do that, go ahead. Someone else, a woman, she created a neighborhood giving tree and she put homemade face masks on them. That's something that I've been seeing a lot. Even like in my area, like kids and like students, even elementary school, middle school, they're making masks, and it's a great way to help the community and healthcare workers that are in need. Like I've seen videos of healthcare workers who have had to wear the same mask since like March, like the end of March. And it's been almost a month, so they're in desperate need for all of this personal protective equipment. So if you can do something like that, that'd be a great initiative to start. Also, in terms of like the retail industry, public supermarkets are buying food from struggling farmers so that they can use it to feed families in need. Not everyone is in the best financial situation right now, so anything that you can do to help them is great, and companies like Publix are helping with that too. So now Fatima is going to talk about election 2020.
So thank you, Akalish, for sharing all of like the good things that are also happening in the world. But so New York canceled its Democratic presidential primary. So they had to reschedule it for June 23rd, and it was obviously earlier, but because of COVID-19 and considering the fact that New York is like one of the most affected states because of like COVID in general, the New York State Board of Elections decided that it would cancel its presidential primary. And so the way that this happened was that they struck Senator Bernie Sanders' name from the ballot. And so some of you guys might remember, we talked about this a couple weeks earlier, that even though Senator Bernie Sanders technically is no longer running his campaign because he like suspended it, he's still in like the presidential primary because he's like able to still collect delegates, and hopefully, or his plan was to have more influence over the party platform. And so what this means is that voters in 20 counties won't have to actually like go to the polls and vote because they don't have any other like Democratic contests on their ballot. But the Senator Sanders campaign is calling it like a huge blow to democracy because obviously if he was able to like get more delegates, considering the fact that New York has 247, his like campaign would be able to have more influence over the party's platform. And so that's something that a lot of like election watchdogs are saying is a like dangerous thing to do, instead of like working to like make the election actually safe for people, like implementing mail-in voting and stuff like that. It's sort of like they're just deciding to not have the election overall. And so that's something that's happening in New York. And so in the same vein, it's also incredibly important to make sure that in some cases elections like aren't happening in person, because a couple weeks ago, Wisconsin did have its primary. And instead of like implementing like huge measures of like mail-in voting and like closing polls, like a lot of the poll workers did, like in fact, Milwaukee County only had 5 of its 180 polling locations open. Like the state legislature, which was like controlled by Republicans, like pushed it through, along with like the Supreme Court, because they wanted to make sure that their like Republican candidate for Supreme Court won the election. And so in Wisconsin, specifically in Milwaukee County, there's around 40 people who may have been infected with COVID because they participated in the Wisconsin elections. And so that's everything from like voting to like just being a poll worker and like making sure that people themselves are able to vote. And so there's a bunch of pictures showing people were like lined up like blocks and blocks of people because they were trying to maintain social distancing and still be able to vote. And so the Milwaukee County Health Commissioner, whose name is Jeanette Kowalik, said that they're still analyzing data to show a connection between people participating in voting activities and becoming infected because of it. And so obviously like the data right now is not complete, but it's still important to think about how people, because they're trying to still make sure that their voices are heard and that they're able to participate in like democracy and like vote, they're potentially risking their lives if states don't work to make sure that voting by mail is like more accessible and that people don't actually have to show up in person and vote, especially if they have like some kind of pre-existing condition that makes them more likely to have more complications with COVID. And so this thing of delaying elections is happening all over the world because Ethiopia is also delaying its election. And so it indefinitely postponed its August elections. And so this is like the first in what will very likely be a wave of countries across the African continent delaying or postponing their elections, because countries like Burundi, Malawi, Tanzania, and the Ivory Coast also have like major elections that are coming up this year. And so the problem with this delay in Ethiopia's elections is that it's supposed to have an election every 5 years. It's like within the Constitution, sort of like how the United States Constitution, we're supposed to have an election like every 4 years because that's like a president's term. So this delay could potentially exacerbate political tensions, and there's already existing ethnic conflicts that are happening between like different political rivals, between like the ruling government and other like opposition groups. And so even though they are trying to like rein in COVID, and that's part of the reason why this election is being delayed, there's also some opposition to it because this would be like one of Ethiopia's like major elections, and it would influence like how the legislature and different laws within Ethiopia are carried out over the next 5 years. And so I think it's really important to keep in mind, especially like during a pandemic, that how public health officials and elected officials are able to balance keeping a population safe and healthy, but also making sure that they are still allowing people's voices to be heard through elections. And so with that, make sure you're following Fiveable across all our social media. And if you're not already participating in the Fiveable Olympics, make sure you do, because there's going to be a lot of prizes and a lot of like interesting things happening over the next few weeks. And so you guys saw Brandon earlier tell you to follow TikTok. So yeah, hope you guys actually do go out and follow the social media. But here's the schedule again, in case you're curious. Mondays is math and English, Tuesdays will be social science, Wednesdays is science, and Thursdays is all things history. So I hope you guys tune in next week, and if there's no more questions, that's me and Akilish signing off.
I think it starts this week, yeah. Or maybe next week. I don't know. I know they said the focus was going to be this week, so keep an eye on fiveable.me, and then you'll get all the information. If you're signed up, you should get notifications.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks,
y'all.
everyone. Bye.